There you go. Okay. Testing, testing. Is that picking up?
Sounds like it.
Okay. I don't think I'm starting yet. I think Martha, we've got to wait for Martha to, for Martha to start. We're just testing the mic if it works. Okay. Now we can have awkward, kind of awkward silence.
So I was going to introduce myself, but since I look around and you're all part of my flock, I don't think I need to do that. So let me just say a few brief words of introduction and thank you for being here. I don't think I need to tell you where the restrooms are, and I know I don't need to tell you to stick around for cookies because you know that anytime this group gathers, there's food involved. So, yeah. What's that? It's a just kitchen here, or just kitchen. Well, we'll let Anna unpack that one. So I know that some of you have read this book and some of you have not. And actually, Anna has some copies of the book as well as some of her other books that if you'd like to purchase them today, we certainly would welcome that. But if you haven't had a chance to look at this book at all, let me tell you that, and this is, I just pulled this off the internet, right? This book is about the kitchen as a place of resistance, where food preparation is an act of passion and hospitality, and where faith traditions, food histories, and local foodways are explored. I want to say it's also got recipes and stories and poems and Mad Libs and memories and questions for reflection and food rules and flow charts. It's got a little bit of everything in it, and it is very approachable and very enjoyable, and I highly recommend it. And so what I want to say, I want to begin in prayer by using one of the liturgies from your book. It's called Before We Begin, and although I'm going to make references to a kitchen, please fill in at the word kitchen this space. Before we begin, we breathe. In and out, in and out. Before we begin, we notice what is here, what is not, what we let go of, what we welcome in. Before we begin, we set our hopes, our intentions, our prayers, that on this day, in this hour, in this kitchen, or this space, we may be present to the love and justice that is. Anna Woofenden is a colleague of mine, the rector up the road at St. John's Episcopal in Northampton, and it is my great pleasure to introduce her to you.
Thank you so much, and thank you all for the invitation. I don't get to do this very often. I usually get to do this. I'm still wearing this from this morning, but it's really such a joy amongst friends and colleagues to get to kind of explore this other part of my life that mostly has taken a back seat since going back to full-time parish life. So thank you for that. It's really a joy. And I also have to just say from the outset that my co-author, Derek Weston, he and I generally, in recent years, will do things online. So we can both jump on Zoom. He's in Maryland here. But whenever we do a live event, just one of us, it always feels like we're kind of missing half of ourselves and our team. But we still do the same, we often will cover some of the similar things. So I will share a couple of his writings from the book because he is here with us in spirit and in his words. I love that you started with that. And it means that you just started off the presentation perfectly. As was mentioned throughout this book, there are liturgies that are part of it. And for those of you who explored it, the idea of the kitchen being this place of spirituality and reflection, one of the ways that, as Lutherans and Episcopalians, is that liturgy shapes us, and our praying shapes our believing and shapes our life. And so one of the things that you'll find woven throughout this text are opportunities for prayer. So thank you for starting us off with that, which means that I'm going to go to the next section in my notes. So I'm going to get into why this book, and I'm going to talk about some different parts of it, and we're going to do a few readings, and we'll have some time for questions, and all of that is to come. But the first thing I want to do before we get into any of that is to ground ourselves in a kitchen. So I'm going to invite you, and just whatever makes you kind of go into more of a reflective place, you're welcome to do that, to think of a kitchen that's been formative for you. Who is doing the cooking? What is being cooked? What do you smell? What is the texture of the conversation or of the quiet? What is trying to pull you out of the kitchen? What is drawing you in? And I'm going to invite you to just take a minute. This won't be a long, but just take a minute and turn to the person next to you and share a few glimpses of that kitchen that you brought to mind. So just take a minute. Share what you're comfortable sharing. So just a shout out so that to hear, what are some of the just snippets you heard? What did you hear about people's kitchens?
Learning handmade pasta from mother and grandmother.
Learning handmade pasta from mother and grandmother.
Cooking mushrooms over the stove and smoking a cigarette.
Oh, cooking mushrooms over a stove and cooking while smoking a cigarette.
I was thinking I have an antique cook stove from 1910. It's not in my kitchen, but in my living room. And a lot this winter, I was cooking on it. And what the prep and the thought process to get the wood split small enough to fill the wood box and do makes great, great dishes. So you can't have stew and chicken dumplings, but it's an effort. It's a different type of cooking almost.
Yeah, so cooking on an antique wood stove and all the preparation it takes to get the wood ready and to make the fire and get it the right temperature. Yes. Yeah.
Place of safety and gathering place for friends, favorite place to be.
Place of safety and gathering place for friends, a favorite place to be. That's great. Yeah.
You know, the comfort of the pantry. We had a pantry next to the kitchen, and the pantry had a counter on it. And I think we remember the wax paper, and it was the place to prepare the meal. Usually a Sunday meal, sometimes we would start on a Saturday.
Uh-huh.
Preparation for the family to get together on Sunday.
Oh.
Something about that pantry. With that memory was passed on, because when my nephew built his house, his new home, it had to have a pantry.
Had to have a pantry. Oh, the comfort of the pantry, right? That's a powerful extension of the kitchen and that preparation. Yeah, thank you.
Eating the soup in the kitchen and feeling very loved, insecure.
Loved and secure. Thank you. Yeah.
Our house was always full of visiting relatives and visiting clergy and everybody else. And my mother always had lots of food. But just before we sat down, my mother would say FHB, which means family hold back, because there may not be enough.
Oh, FHB, family hold back. That's great. Yeah, visitors go first. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. One more? Yeah.
Getting a special treat from Grandma when you helped.
Oh, special treat from Grandma when you helped prep the meal. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Well, Martha mentioned that there are Mad Libs in here, which is true. So what I would like to share with you now is both my own and Derek's fill-in of the Mad Libs, so you can learn a little bit about the kitchens of the authors who bring you this book. So I'll first offer you mine. What do you bring to your kitchen? The first kitchen counter I remember is warm oak wood in my parents' home. My mother is cooking there, hands kneading the vat of bread dough and singing coming from her lips. Our home is on the land of Douglas fir trees and bald eagles, a small island surrounded by the Puget Sound. I remember the fresh garden lettuce and carrots chopped together to make a salad, the smell of sweet potatoes mixing with roast beef filling the room. My grandmother cooked applesauce cake with efficiency and consistency. Sometimes I was invited to stir the soup, and other times I would make the whole meal, and I always knew I had a place in the kitchen. As I grew, I discovered that kitchens could also be fun and peaceful, and I found joy in creating places of welcome and warmth. Today in my kitchen, you'll find the KitchenAid mixer on the granite countertop with my favorite wooden spoon from my time in Ghana standing nearby. Sausage and cabbage sautéing is something I treasure in our kitchen, with bubbles and squeaks you can hear. The sizzling mingles with the smell of caraway and dill as our Christmas Eve meal is made. While some days my kitchen is a place I barely run through on the way out the door, there is always hope for peace and presence as I long to be part of creating a more just and generous world. And from Derek. The first kitchen counter I remember is white laminate in my grandparents' home. My grandfather is cooking there, hands stirring and jokes coming from his lips. Our home was on the land of which with a walnut tree and all kinds of birds in an urban neighborhood, surrounded by other homes and near the local playground. I remember the bread and cheese melting together to make grilled cheese sandwiches, the smell of chicken mixing with greens filling the room. My mother cooked macaroni and cheese with grace and generosity. Sometimes I was invited to stir the batter, and other times I stood back and watched, and I always knew something good was coming. As I grew, I discovered that kitchens can also be calm and reflective, and I found peace in creating places of hospitality and fellowship. Today in my kitchen, you'll find a scale on the wooden counter with a bread knife nearby. You'll also find basil and olive oil blended to make pesto. The sound of water boiling mingles with the smell of fresh grated cheese as dinner is being made. While sometimes my kitchen is chaotic, there's always hope for order coming from the chaos, as I long to be part of creating a more compassionate and convivial world. So I share those two stories and invite you to share your own stories of the kitchen to get to the heart of why we wrote this book. So about a time ago, I think it's like almost 7 years ago now, a friend, Sam Chamberlain, and I created a podcast called the Food and Faith Podcast. And over time, Derek Weston joined us as well. And it's kind of on a little like long-term pause, hiatus. It may be resurging soon, but there are over 100 episodes that you can find. They're still up on wherever you listen to podcasts. And we've interviewed all sorts of people about food and faith. And our tagline was from the soil and around the table, conversations from the soil and around the table. And we interviewed religious people, and we interviewed environmentalists, and we interviewed people across different traditions, and we heard a lot about faith-based gardening, and we heard about Good News Gardens, and we heard about things that are happening out on your lawn, and we heard about farms that have some kind of spiritual foundation, and we heard about people as an act of their own spiritual working in the soil. And then we heard a lot about eating the food. So we heard about dinner churches, and we heard about feeding programs, and we heard about food equity work and justice work to make sure that people had access to food. But what we noticed is that we didn't hear a lot about the in-between, what happens between the food being grown or produced and the eating of it. We didn't hear about the kitchen. And when we would try to invite people to come back in the kitchen, we found there was some resistance and some curiosity around. We became curious about why are we so resistant to talking about the kitchen. Through a longer story of events, we had this opportunity to write this book. And when we decided, and the prompt, the invitation was to write a book about cooking. And both Derek and I at first were like, that's not our area of expertise. We're both pastors, we're not chefs. We know a lot about gardening, and we know some about, doing church around feeding, but we're like cooking. But we began brainstorming and found out that was actually a really good qualification for writing this book, because what we hope to do is to bring together voices from across the spectrum of people of cooking. There's a few chefs, but mostly the people we interviewed are people who cook or don't. And we wrote this book not for all of the foodies, though certainly some of us, I'm sure, are in this room, but for humans, because as humans, we need to eat, and one way or another, somehow we are connected to a kitchen, whether we are personally the ones cooking in it or not. Our food, for the most part, goes through the kitchen and to be able to get to us, and we share in common that we all eat. We all have to eat. So we did a whole series of interviews. We did over 20, 25 interviews with different people across the spectrum of to prepare for this book. And you'll see what many of those interviews are referenced, both directly and in more general terms within this book. And so we mixed it up a little bit about how we did our interview questions, and we asked some pieces, and what we noticed was people kept wandering out of the kitchen. They kept going back out to the garden or to the table, and we'd be like, let's come back into the kitchen. And so we were paying attention to that and curious about that. And one of my big learnings in the process of writing, and particularly the first few chapters, was to realize how much the kitchen holds. We heard a lot of, I think, kind of warm memories just now, but there are hard memories in kitchens, and there's hard histories in kitchens, and there's hard presence in kitchens. That if you start to look at the racial inequality, the gender inequality, the way that resources and access to resources changes the way that people are interacting in their kitchen. Sometimes that means that you grew the food because you needed to grow the food because that's the way you get your food, and we can tell a good story about that, but there's also that scarcity piece that comes with it. And that the kitchen is really a place where you can tease out some of these bigger societal and personal places of challenge, places of growth, places of opportunity, places of learning. And so I think as we began writing, we were discovering, oh, this is why we're writing this book. We didn't quite know, what was that deeper question that we were wrestling with. And so it gave this really beautiful opportunity to wrestle with what does that kitchen hold, and then where does faith and justice what does that have to say about this? And I'm going to tell you right now, if you've read the book, I hope you discover this to be true, and if you haven't, that this is not a book that has a 16-point plan that you can check it all off, and then you'll have a just kitchen. In fact, one of the I'm going to say disagreements that we got in with our publisher was about the title. We had titled it A Just Kitchen because we don't think we have the right way to do this. We think there are many right ways to have a just kitchen, and there's not one solution. Just so you know, if you ever work with a publisher in a book, they're in charge, not the authors. So The Just Kitchen apparently was going to sell better, and that's what it's titled. But Derek and I will remain to this day to say, this is not the one way to do it, but we hope that by asking these questions, by bringing these wonderings together, that this is an opportunity and an invitation, truly an invitation to exploring what does it look like in your life as people who are seeking a more just and generous world, as people who care about our planet, care about one another, and are coming at it from a place of faith, or in that general genre of faith. What does that look like to be paying attention in our kitchen? And so our hope is that by telling some of these stories, by asking some of these questions, by giving some of these liturgies to shape and to hold us, is that each one of you will have an invitation to look and see, where is God at work in your kitchen? Where is something trying to be renewed, restored, healed? And how can we share that and spread that, maybe in other kitchens, but even more generally in the work that we're doing in this world? So I want to share I'll just say, throughout the book, it is written in one voice, a collective, cohesive voice between the two of us, and then we have pieces where we pull out, where it's our own stories. So I just want to share briefly one of mine, and this is in the section of the kitchen as a place of reflection. A few quiet moments. For me, touching base with the land and the soil helps move me from a place of production to a place of intention and reflection. It's often the piece that grounds me to enter the kitchen a little more mindfully. Because I'm a pastor with a busy weekend schedule, Mondays are my regular day off, which means a day off from my day job, but a day of full-time parenting as my spouse and I switch off caring for our little one. This past spring, a few years back, To carve out time for writing this book, we had the gift of a high school babysitter coming over from across the street for a few hours on Monday afternoons so that I could work on the book and then prepare dinner for our family. It was fascinating to pair dedicated time writing about kitchens while spending time in my own. I became more acutely aware of my experience of cooking and the complexities around it. From working on a chapter about the importance of taking time and space for cooking, to my own rushing into the kitchen to whip up some eggs and sausage to be ready for dinner at 6 p.m. I found myself jumping right into the tension between the ideals of the Just Kitchen and the realities of my life. Yeah, there we go. I'm not alone in that? Okay, good. It's a constant invitation for reflection. For me, from late spring through the fall, one of my most grounding spiritual practices is one that comes right before the kitchen. And look at me, I'm wandering out into the garden, just like all of our guests did as well. It's a harvest in the garden. Whether it's with my toddler running around and picking all sorts of things or a quiet, solitary trip to the backyard garden, this time of paying attention helps set the scene for the cooking I am about to do. Fresh peas, new lettuce leaves, and fresh herbs go into the colander, and I marvel at the crispness of each leaf and the potency of the flavors. Even if it's just 5 minutes, it feels like a gift I can give myself to start the cooking process out in the garden. Once I'm inside, I take solitary kitchen time as a special treat. While there's certainly something joyful about the toddler in her kitchen tower and my husband setting the table, when it's just me in the kitchen, I find it a place to reflect. I can let my mind wander in meandering prayer as the feel of my hands holding the knife and the rhythmic movements of chopping create space for my mind to quiet and my heart to settle. Even when the pace picks up and I'm juggling the potatoes boiling in one pan and the fish braising in another, I find there's something about the rhythm that I can get lost in. For me, practices in which I can get absorbed and let go of the other thoughts and anxieties that often travel with me are essential to my well-being. When cooking holds some intentionality, it gets me out of my head and into my body, half the battle. And though there is a product at the end of it, the process is the practice. And so by the time we sit down at the table to eat, my soul has already been fed. So I offer that invitation to think about how the process of cooking, whether it's throwing a pizza in the oven or making some hours-long dish, is an invitation for our own spiritual practice, our own ability to ground ourselves back in the tactileness of the water, of the food, of the feeling of the knife, of the sautéing. I was struck by how many of your memories from the kitchen had some kind of physical aspect to it, the mushroom sautéing or the firewood into the stove, that it is an embodied practice to cook. It's both something that we imbibe, we take into our bodies, and it's also embodied, that we are using our bodies to do that work. And to think about how is that not just a task that needs to be done, but actually an invitation to prayer, an invitation to be shaped and to be attentive and to be thinking and feeling and looking and being aware, using all of our senses, the smells. That was another thing that came up, right? The smells that happen in the kitchen, the different ways that we are interacting with the food that we are cooking. And so just as our spiritual lives, probably for most of us, we don't spend hours and hours a day in dedicated solitary prayer, but we're wrestling with that being pulled from our ideals and the reality of our lives. And so the kitchen, like all things, but it's particularly, is this opportunity to have these little touchstones where we reconnect with prayer, we reconnect with ourselves, we reconnect with God, and that can set us on a trajectory. I know for some of us, that first cup of coffee or tea or something right in the morning, that does something. And if it doesn't happen, we can blame the whole day on it, right? Like, I didn't get my cup of tea this morning. And I think we can kind of joke about that, and we can talk about caffeine and whatever else it is. But there's something about these rituals, these things that we do that physically ground us, that help us to connect spiritually and to have that spiritual awareness in that way. And so there's this invitation to being a person, a spiritual being, and to being attentive to that. There's also an invitation to justice and to attentiveness. And one of the first steps in doing work of justice, being that caring for creation, caring for one another, caring for the bigger world, is attentiveness and paying attention. Paying attention to where does our food come from in the first place? Who picked it? Who grew it? Who transported it? Who sold it to us? What animals, what part of the earth, what about the soil? What are those microbes? What is helping to give that? And I like to talk about the idea that when we're looking at justice as a whole big thing, which could be super overwhelming, right? And injustice is really the thing that's overwhelming. Justice sounds good. Injustice is overwhelming. That food is one of those things, if we pull on the thread of food, kind of connects to everything else. And we start to think about, income inequality or creation care or gender inequality or racial inequality, all those things, access to food, because we all have to eat. And food systems are some of our largest systems because it's something that we all share in common. All humans have to eat. And as our food systems have shifted and changed, and I'm not going to get into a huge rant about food systems, but just to say that it is a spiritual practice to pay attention to that thread, to kind of tug on it. Sometimes if we're doing a longer workshop, we'll actually do that game where you take the ball of yarn and everyone's around the room and you throw it around and then you start tugging on it. And so quickly we become aware that by the nature of being beings who eat, and most of us are probably not living on an independent, small-scale farm all by ourselves. Well, we've got somebody who's close over here. We've got somebody who's close, actually. But most of us, while we may grow some of our food, we're not independent. And Michael's not independent from the rest of us, right? That we are all connected in this. And so when we can become attentive in our piece, it starts to echo out and to have a greater impact. So in that thought, I want to move from the family kitchen, the individual kitchen, to the idea about what about our church kitchens and the kitchens in synagogues and in mosques and in community centers and in elementary schools. What about these kitchens that are shared spaces? And I'd like to start that conversation by sharing a bit from my time out in the Los Angeles area, where I founded a church that was in an empty lot. We took an empty lot and turned it into an urban farm, an outdoor sanctuary. And it was one of the places that I learned so much about what does it mean when we reconnect to our food, to the environment, to our community, to each other, and to God, and what happens when we do that all in one space. So I think I now am in a church that it's almost 200-year-old church, old stone church. So it's not about one or the other, but this was an experiment to say, what happens if you just cram that all in together? And I would be interested to hear, and we can certainly hear these stories during the time, how some of these stories show up in your garden right next to your church, because you're doing that too. You're bringing these things together. So this story is called Feed and Be Fed. The ability for everyone to contribute is a value we see time and time again when it comes to group cooking. Yes, humans share the need to be physically fed, but also many share the need to be able to offer to other people and contribute to the fabric of society. So often when people are struggling and have physical needs that are unmet, toxic givers focus on what they can provide for the other people, failing to mutually engage and find common invitation for all to care for each other. At the Garden Church, the urban farm and outdoor sanctuary I planted in Los Angeles in 2014, we did a lot of things together. We worked in the garden, planting and weeding and watering and harvesting. We gathered and turned the compost and built new trellises and tied up tomato plants. Sunday gatherings were held in that same space, with the ground beneath our feet and the sky as our roof. And then we ate together. A beautiful swath of humanity gathered around the community meal, some for whom that was their only meal of the day, others who would have otherwise been eating alone in their apartment, and others who found that community gathering was a different kind of nourishment. It was a time of connection and community for all of us. We ate together around picnic tables in a city lot and learned together about the growing food that was cooked and enjoyed. The Garden Church community meal uniquely involved the full circle, from growing the food, to eating the food, to composting the leftovers. Even as the cooking element was primarily done in people's home kitchens, on Fridays, community members often came to harvest whatever was in season and then to take it home to cook for the Sunday community meal. On any given Sunday, you'll find an 87-year-old grandmother and former nun bringing in large vats of polenta with Swiss chard from the garden laced through it. A fifth-grade boy and his two friends might come in with a huge batch of pesto pasta made with an abundance of basil. One woman, who proclaimed herself lonely and didn't want to eat alone, brought in a vegetable medley made with the harvest. All these people circled around, and we'd ask each other, "What's on our table today? Tell us where the food came from." As people shared about the dishes they'd brought, others cheered and expressed appreciation in anticipation for the food they were about to eat. While eating, recipes were shared and connections made. "I never knew how to cook mustard greens," one person said to another. "It makes me so happy to see the food I cooked being enjoyed," said someone else. "It's rather poignant to think that I was part of planting those seeds and tending the crops that we're now eating," another reflected. While the kitchen was not right there, bustling with people cooking together, the act of cooking with the food that had been communally grown and then sharing that food together in community completed a circle in which we were all held. While most of the time the food was made in people's personal kitchens, a few makeshift kitchen moments happened right there in the garden, at the picnic tables where the salads were often prepared. Being in California, there was rarely a time of year without something that could be harvested for a salad. Yes, I do miss that part of the weather. There's a lot of things. I'm happy to be here, but I do miss that part. Be it a tender lettuce greens in the cooler season or tomato and basil in the heat. Anyone who showed up could be part of creating this culinary offering, starting with harvesting in a wicker basket and then moving to the outdoor sink and the salad spinner that lived there expressly for this purpose. Often fresh herbs and even edible flowers bedecked the green offerings, and people who didn't have kitchens to cook in found great joy in being able to create a kitchen right there and contribute. The motto of the Garden Church is "Feed and be fed," with the goal of feeding in body, mind, and spirit. It's embedded at the center of the Garden Church community that this is a mutual effort. One of the things that I find incredibly powerful about cooking, which is different than eating, is that everyone can have a job. The thing that connects us around eating is that everyone needs to eat. But the thing about cooking is that suddenly everyone has a part in it and a place in it. And I found in my time at the Garden Church that particularly folks who are living outdoors, who are spending a lot of their day going places and having to ask for things, one of the most transformative experiences that they could have was to walk into a place and be greeted by name and then given a job. So Jarrett, he knew about watering. He knew how to do the watering. He knew you water the roots, not the leaves. He'd come in, and then not only did he have a job, but I'd say, "Oh, so-and-so, you're new. Jarrett will show you what to do." And what that does to someone, if you think about, if you spent most of your day having to ask for things and rely on others for things and need things, that one of the power of being able to contribute and to be part of and to give back changes the whole scene. This is something I think we often miss when we're trying to do good in the world. And I say this this broadly. I don't know if this applies to everyone in this room, but I think there are many places at churches and church groups where we kind of put ourselves in the place of we are the ones that have something to give, which is true. But we're also the ones who have things to receive. And even more, we are the ones, especially if we have resources like kitchens and buildings and maybe some bandwidth for programming, we're the ones that have the opportunity to create community that is based on mutuality, that is meeting each of us where we're at with whatever we have to contribute. And that means it's harder. It's so much harder than just doing it ourselves. Because it means we have to think about who are we welcoming and how can people contribute. This actually gets very quickly into questions about how do we welcome our young people? How do we welcome children? How do we welcome people with different abilities and disabilities? How do we show up believing and knowing that every single human being is both hungry for something and has something to offer? And that our job is to create culture and spaces of mutuality. It's hard work, and I will tell you, having started a church that was based on that, our motto was feed and be fed, it was based on that, and every week we'd run up against things where it's like, oh, we forgot, oh, we slid, because this is not how we generally are trained to think. And I think especially in us well-meaning churches, like, well, we can do it, and we have something to give, and again, that is true, but that deeper work of welcome and mutuality is something that is deeply powerful. And I think this comes back to our conversation about why the kitchen actually is something that we kind of try to avoid. Because the kitchen means we have to do that deeper work of figuring out mutuality, right? Figuring out what are the inequalities? What are the ways that we are falling into old habits and patterns? And how do we actually stretch ourselves and let go? And it might be a little messier, literally and figuratively. But what happens when we really are inviting mutuality into our kitchens and into our churches, into our communities, into our lives? And when we're doing that kind of action reflection of we do it, and then we reflect, ooh, how did that go? Ooh, I thought I was being really welcoming there, but I totally missed that so-and-so had a gift to give, and I wasn't even paying attention. I think that invitation to mutuality is something that a Just Kitchen can invite us into and can remind us of. And that's something we can practice in our own personal kitchens and something that we can bring out and continue to do communally in our communal and our group kitchens. So I want to end with one more piece. I know I'm throwing a lot at you all, and we will have time for some Q&A and further discussion. But we always end the podcast with this question of what gives you hope. And we talk about this is not the rainbows and unicorns, everything's fine kind of hope, but that deep hope, that abiding hope, that hope that gets you up in the morning, that hope that makes you keep trying even when it's feeling rough, that hope that you hope for future generations. And so what I would like to do is I'm going to read and we asked all of our guests that we interviewed this question, and many of them we included in the book. And I want to read the response of what gives you hope from the Reverend Dr. Christopher Carter, and then just going to give you a little heads up. I'm then going to ask us to reflect together on what brings you hope, what's bringing you hope today. And so we'll close this portion of the time together with some hope. So what gives you hope? By the Reverend Dr. Christopher Carter. To me, the virtue of hope sits between the vices of despair and cynicism, that nothing is going to be good, so whatever. And to me, hope is also a presumption, which has a lot to do with the way I was raised in the Black church, that everything's going to work out because it's all part of God's plan. That was the kind of language we heard growing up. I didn't resonate with that because I'd experienced too much craziness growing up. I felt like, no, this does not seem consistent with the God I know in the Bible. God's plan for me is not to have all this suffering. So what gives me hope is my recognition that hope comes from the transformation I think is possible in the human condition. I look at my grandfather and I see the fact that a man who's almost 90 years old wakes up every day with a particular kind of gratefulness that is just astonishing. Even though many of his experiences are absolutely terrible, he says, "Load me up this morning." That's the kind of language he has. He's glad he's able to be here. He has a particular positive outlook, but he's also a realist. He understands what's happening. But he also understands that so many of his colleagues and friends and family didn't make it. And so he's grateful, legitimately grateful, that he feels like God has blessed him to be. That gratefulness gives me hope. I can continue to do the work I feel God has called me to do, and I believe that I can do it in a way that doesn't wear me down or make me feel burned out, and that gives me life and is life-affirming. My son is another reason for hope. He's what gives me the will to do the work. I want my son to inherit a space and a place that allows him to flourish as a multiracial child, as a big child. My son is going to be a big black man. He comes from a family of tall folks. And what is the planet going to be like for him? So I think my hope is centered on these kinds of spaces and on my commitment to live the call that God's placed upon me and to embody the call. It's a theological answer. I believe in my prayer life and in my worship life and in the relationship I have cultivated with the divine. And as the church elders will say, like Jeremiah, there's a fire in my bones. I can't not do this work. There have been times when I would have preferred not to do this work, but I can't not do it, so I'm living it out. And so I'd like to ask you, what gives you hope? I'm just going to give us a moment of silence to sit with that question. And then as you're ready, if anyone is willing to share with a larger group, I welcome that. What gives you hope? Yes.
The coming of spring gives me hope. After this less than ideal winter, knowing that it's going to be better, and it will be better, and that's what gives me hope.
Thank you. Yeah, the coming of spring. Me too. Me too. Yeah, thank you. Yes.
I think a place like this, with this church community and where we gather, and just even to hear the messages like we heard this morning from John 11, the hope of resurrection and everlasting life, and the love that binds us here, those things give me hope.
Yeah, thank you. The church community and the hope of resurrection and that binding together. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. What else gives you hope? Yes.
I don't have much hope for the human race. I put hope in the planet and the earth, things of that nature. You know,
Yeah.
I think the earth will survive this human race. We'll get on with another one maybe.
Yeah, it shows it doesn't have a lot of hope for the human race, but has hope for the planet and its willingness, able to come. What comes.
It's all about God, and God is everything. Not just us. Maybe think too much about us.
Yeah. That's a beautiful, hopeful, and hard hope to sit with, isn't it? Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
What gives me hope is real people. we're filled with love. And that's really important. So, and I think I have that hope that this love, this togetherness, this being a part of humanity is going to be more important than winning wars.
Hope in the real human people. Okay, yeah.
Real human people.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. One more? Yeah.
Several years ago, I had a working relationship that went incredibly sour. It destroyed me. It probably took 2 years for me to get back on track. And the way that I was able to get back on track was to start with animal husbandry, because it was something that I had to show up for every single day. Same thing, do it over and over again, and to live with gratitude. And it was the living with gratitude that showed me that there was hope and there was space for the mending of a broken heart and relationships. And I'll leave it at that. Living with gratitude gives me hope.
Living with gratitude, and it sounds like a practice, a daily practice. Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Well, I want to open it up to all of you. Questions, reflections, something you want to ask, something you want to go deeper on. The thing on page whatever that I don't know if I don't remember, but I can look it up. Yes.
The one thing I wanted to say about kitchens is that whenever there's a family gathering or a bunch of friends that get together, where does everybody meet?
In the kitchen.
In the kitchen. Everybody crowds into the kitchen, no matter how big
Yep.
your house is or how many rooms you have. It's
Yeah.
always
In the kitchen.
We're
Yep.
trying to stay out, and we've got a counter, and everybody's hanging over the counter.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, that's right. There's a draw. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yes, Martha.
I think the Mad Lib, which is very near the beginning of the book, it's on page 12 if you have the book with you. It was a real eye-opener to me because when I filled in all the blanks, I mean, it actually had me laughing, but I realized that my memories of my kitchen growing up were not good memories. They were not pleasant memories. I didn't have warm, fuzzy feelings. My mother did not like to cook. She did what she had to do to get food on the table. She used a lot of convenience foods that were, available in the 60s and 70s. And we weren't really invited to be a part of it and really had no interest in it. But even that, even knowing that I started from a place of not really having good associations with the kitchen, made me appreciate how much I've grown and how much I now do appreciate the kitchen as a place of creativity and nurturing and togetherness. As Tricia and I, we made it we made a commitment to that 4:30 to 6 time every day was going to be time that we spent preparing food and then sharing it together, and how much life that's brought me now. And it made me glad to see that even for those of us who maybe didn't have the warmest, coziest memories in the kitchen, can still find hope there. So thank you for making me laugh at myself.
Yeah.
Sometimes I was invited to make the instant iced tea. It was the thing I filled in, and I was just
Yeah.
like, that's really pathetic.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Thank you. Did I see a hand somewhere over here? Oh, right here. Okay.
I'm going to go back to your hope thing, because I really agonized over that when you answered it. Things have been so bad lately, hope is in short supply. In fact, I would have said the exact opposite of Ruth. I love winter. I was on cross-country skis 40 days this time. I realized I'm in an arm. But here's the thing. We like to travel. We just came back from a trip. I'll tell you what really does give me hope is the resilience of people and the attitude so many people took. I am admittedly embarrassed to be an American, like I'm abroad right now. Yet, we didn't run into anybody who was malicious towards us in any way, and we had a couple of discussions with shopkeepers and locals we met who were just wonderful. Like, you can't blame yourself for this stuff. You just have to keep moving, do the right thing by people, and it was wonderful. So I think it's the resilience of people that I've experienced that's what gives me hope.
resilience of people. Yeah.
And admittedly, in a travel thing, food figures into a lot of it.
Yes.
The alcohol figures because they were giving us all these little liqueurs.
That's another book.
That's right. Did you have a question, a comment here? Or?
I did.
Okay.
I'm going to pass.
Okay. Yes.
We were talking about people coming together and everybody getting a job and teaching. I think when we do Loaves and Fishes, the regulars that go down and prep have that routine that everybody's like in their spot. They've got the knife. They know which whatever. So when somebody new comes in, what can I do? And you're like, what are you going to do? That is, it's really kind of funny because, of course, nobody does it like you do.
Yep.
Nobody chops, whatever.
Yep.
But it's interesting to see and to do and reach out and to take in, and then everything just goes. It just happens. And the conversations are exceptional because we're there.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. I've done dinner church at a few different places in my life and career, a number of different ones. And I find that, like, everyone thinks the cool part is, like, the eating together, right? And that's where everyone kind of shows up. But where the magic happens is in the kitchen. And that's where the relationships are really built. And the thing that I've had, as I've like taught other people how to do dinner church and mentored one of our interns, the thing that I had to like teach is that she was so prepared that when people showed up at 5:30, all the jobs were done. And I was like, you can't do that. And I said, no, it's anxiety producing because it means that you're gonna have to trust that in half an hour, you know, like, yes, the soup needs to be on at 4 o'clock, right? I mean, there's things that need to happen earlier, but you gotta leave cutting the bread, leave putting out the tablecloths, leave all those jobs, because when someone shows up and says, I wanna help, our job is to give the work away. Like, our job is not to do the work, our job is to give the work away. And that is so much more work. And they're not gonna do it the way we wanted it, and we have to explain it rather than just doing it. But that's where the transformation happens, and that's when you're working side by side with somebody and you have the conversation, and then we did this thing together. Honestly, one of the things I love about Holy Week is that the services are more complicated, and it takes more people, and it's a chance to invite people in. And we've gone through our whole, like, all of our planning around Holy Week, looking at, like, what are the ways that we can invite more people in? What are the ways that it's not just this, and it's partially like don't burn out the regulars, but it's more importantly, it's bringing people in to have the opportunity to be part of something. And what I hear time and time again is, oh, it was so much more powerful because I was part of creating it. And so thinking about what does that mean in our kitchen settings, but what does it mean in our worship, in our liturgy, in our programming, to always be looking for, like, our job is not to do the work, our job is to give the work away. If we think if we're on the in, right, then our job is to be giving the work away, whether that's to a small child who we think, oh, they can't do it, or if that's to somebody who's new, or whatever it is, that's the job. And to do it in ways that work, right? I'm not gonna hand my 5-year-old a big bread knife to, but there's a job that she can do and that the people can do in that. So it's control, yep. And it's honestly, it's a lot of planning too. It is much harder. The dinner church is a great example. It takes a lot more work to plan a gathering and to stage it in a way that there are appropriate jobs for people at the right times. It is easier to just get there a little earlier and do it all yourself, or do it with your 4 regulars. But to actually plan it out, it means that you have to have a diagram of where the chairs are gonna go and tables are gonna go, and hand rather than just, putting them there. So it takes attention. Yeah. Yes.
It's funny what you're talking about. I think that perfection gets in the way. It's not about the destination, it's the journey.
Yeah, that's right.
But you're thinking about hope. I think of, we talk about the kitchen and the bonding there, but it's that meal we share
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Sharing at the table and then maybe do some dishes together afterwards, and that's where you really can break through. Yeah. Yeah. Because we usually have to go back to the kitchen after the meal, too. Yeah. Yes.
I think imperfection is wonderful.
Yes.
I'm sure everyone's experienced it, where you thought you had everything set right, and then something happens, and you think, oh, it's ruined. But it ends up being the thing that counted the most.
Yeah. That's right.
So allowing others to share their gifts,
Yeah.
it's saying, you can do it too.
Yeah. You know, we at St. John's have one of our values, and in particular actually around liturgy, is we talk about it's not about perfection or performance, it's about participation and being present together. And I can't speak for the Lutherans in the room, but I think that the Episcopalians could say we get really caught up on perfection in liturgy. Like, it has to be performed properly, right? It has to be performed properly. I'm looking at my colleague over here. And the Lutherans in the room can speak to, we all have our own things, and I think we all get caught in perfection differently. And we all get caught in this. I mean, this isn't a judgment upon, it's more just it's a noticing, like, how do we get caught in that? When you make that shift to that, oh, this is about us being together, you can't mess it up, and our higher value is participation. So if our higher value is participation, then we're attentive. It's not that we don't care. In fact, in order for people to participate, it goes back to this thing, you actually have to be more attentive to the liturgy. You have to be more attentive to who's doing what and why and how and where and what, in order for everyone in the space to be able to participate in some way. And it shifts it all. And I find, even as the person who usually gets to participate in a lot of ways, right? You know, I have this on, so I have a lot of roles. It is much more meaningful when I realize my job is to be giving that work away, right? My job is to be pointing to and opening up that broader participation. My job is not to be performing it perfectly, but actually to be bringing us present together, and then how do we all participate together? And that really shifts something. Yeah, I'm all about, like, I think perfection and performance, I think those can really get us tripped up, because they connect with control too, right? It's like, has to be in a certain way, and I have to be able to do it, and I'm the only one. And, I think we can do that individually, but also we can do that as groups too, in ways that don't serve us or others. Yeah.
I see it as it's like a dance in the kitchen where it's not, we're out of our heads. It's a bodily, we are engaged, we're cooking, we're doing, and to share that with someone else, that could be a whole different dynamics being in the kitchen, instead of it's just a job to perform and to get over with.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
We've had a special tradition this Lent of gathering Wednesday nights at 6 o'clock out in our koinonia room for soup and bread, and we come in for a service of compline afterwards in this space. And it's been so wonderful with that sharing, because different people between us share the soup and the bread.
Oh.
Folks are doing the cleanup and the setup. And then different people have volunteered, you know, we kind of, who wants to lead next week?
Nice.
Leading the service. And it just builds this tremendous family bond
Yeah.
among us. And just the having to prepare soup for your brothers and sisters, it's such an honor. There's a weight to that, a joy. And to share it around the table together, it's hard to explain how powerful this whole experience of those Wednesday night services has been.
And the meal is so simple, unfussy.
Yeah,
Soup,
right.
bread.
Yeah.
Water if we're lucky.
Yeah. Yeah. And Girl Scout cookies. Yeah, it's so good. Yeah, that's good.
Daisies were here, so
Yeah.
once in a while.
That's right.
You know, it's a simplicity too, yeah.
Well, and I like too the way that you're bringing together that there's the worship that happens in the kitchen around the table, and then in the sanctuary, it's all of a part. It's that I think there's something about doing those all together that it's like, oh right, this is all kind of the same thing with different expressions of it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
When you talk about bringing it together during liturgy and the service, when after COVID, and I think it might have been after COVID when we came back together, there's two of us Episcopalians that do share assisting minister at the 8:30 service. I call it the Episcopal service because it's the usual 8:30 years in one of those. And
We have that service at our church too.
it's the same people every week, and they sit way in the back, but it's the everything, all of that. Then we come into the 10 o'clock, and one of the things Mark introduced, and I think it was after COVID, instead of having one worship leader doing everything with her, this is before Michael, started asking for volunteers to read the liturgy, to read the prayers, and then assist her with communion.
Yeah.
And it's been great because in the beginning it was kind of the same people, then other people started, okay, I can do this.
Yeah.
And the best part about it is our Sunday school kids helping out with communion. And when they're, I'm the one that's obviously, I hate what she's doing now. So why are you giving your chalice to a Bible? This is, of course, I'm not saying it, it's in my brain, but boy, I'll tell you.
And then God shows up, and you're like, oh yeah, yeah.
They just jump on us. My turn next week.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and it's wonderful. It's
Yeah.
wonderful. And a couple of them are very young, and this is the mom of several. And she would go up with hers, and there's another mom that would go up with her daughter and just walk next to them.
It's perfect.
So it's really, that reaching out and bringing in, and that's the kitchen, and the meals, so.
Yeah.
It's really great too that they're not afraid to be up there.
Yeah.
So many people are afraid to step up there and chancel.
They know they belong there.
Without their shoes.
Oh yeah, shoes are optional. I mean, at the Last Supper, they probably didn't have their shoes on. They don't just have their feet washed. Come on now.
When
Yeah.
you talk about perfection in the Episcopal Church and everything, those are all those pieces that I'm not sure how you, but you did a good job. You've done a good job assimilating.
Michael's like, we'll talk later. Oh, yeah, it really is. I mean, and it's working. I also think, I think that for those who are shaped in these traditions, I just always want to say it's not a throwing out of the tradition. It's actually an honoring of it. Because when we invite children to come and serve communion, what we are saying is this is so important to us. This is so central to our faith that we break and share bread together, that we are committed to that being for everybody and that being our generation. So it's, I think sometimes kind of the first wave of something new, it's like, oh, we're throwing something. It's like, no, we're grounding so deeply in our tradition that we're bringing it alive and we're opening it up and we're passing it on. And so that it's really, there's an honoring of it. And I think when we make that shift, again, it's not, we're not saying not perfection because we don't care, right? It's not like perfection versus we don't care, just whatever. It's saying, no, it's just that we value participation more. And so we're all for attentiveness and depth and excellence and all those things, but it's for the sake of participation, not for the sake of the perfection. And I think that's an important piece. I think sometimes liturgically especially, it kind of goes on this pendulum swing and they're just like, well, anything goes, whatever. It's like, that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is that there's something there. There's a feather or something there. That was exciting. The Holy Spirit has an opinion. Okay. There's something there that matters so deeply that we're going to keep looking at it and bringing it and being opening it up. Yeah. That's right.
I was going to say, these children feel so important when they do that, and they really take it seriously. You can see how careful that they're trying to be, but it's really good to see them growing with us.
Yeah.
They all like to come, and they all like to participate, and that's important to share that.
Yeah.
Summarize, it gives us hope.
That's what gives us hope, right? Absolutely, me too. You know, this is like veering off topic, but you all kind of took me there. So like, watch out, I'm putting my, but there are studies done across denominations about children and youth and long-term faith involvement. And what the studies show is you can be a mega church that has children's church and it's flashy, or you could have these robust Sunday school programs and the kids are in the Sunday school program the whole time, or these amazing youth groups that do all these cool things. But they're separate from the rest of the congregation. They can be amazing. And what happens is kids may have an engaging experience, but inevitably it drops off, and the data shows it's very rare that then the children, when they're young adults or adults, come back into church. Whereas, if you have, it can be a small, scrappy little church, you could have just a handful of kids. But if children are actively involved in the principal life of the church, so the worship of the church, the programs, the work of the church, and if they're given roles and jobs, and they know the church is the people. I am a person, right? I am, people say like, oh, the children are the future of the church. No, the children are the present of the church, right? Here and now, right now. Data shows that those statistically are people who will continue to be actively engaged and involved in the life of faith and of church. And so I especially like to say this to those of us in our smaller churches, to say, you might be like, oh, we don't have a Sunday school program, or it's just a little thing. What you're doing here in this sanctuary, that's what has that long and lasting input. And that's the piece, and that changes all of us. That means that, yeah, it's a little noisy sometimes, or yeah, it's a little whatever. But that's being the church here and now, and that's forming and informing our children in a different way. So that's a different book, but I took me off. Yeah. Oh, thank you for bringing it back. Thank you. Segue me back to that.
Whenever I'm visiting, we cook, and we're making pizza, with the dough and everything, and doing the whole thing. But even the 2-year-old gets into it, and then they eat it, and they just see like it's coming back, and they get used to doing that. You don't have to call a number to get food delivered. Right. You have to make it.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the kitchen starts there. Even though my kids hated to cook with me, I tried, but they all cook now, so I guess something rubbed off.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. That was both a good segue and a good, and it's participation again. And it takes more time. My 5-year-old is into doing experiments in the kitchen. And we're trying, some days I'm not up for an experiment, but the days what does happen when you put 2 eggs and flour and I just had to think okay, these are the muscles that are being built because it's messy, but it's participation. It's not perfect. Rarely do we actually like to eat it when it's done. So because the rule is the grown-up gets to measure because there's only so much food that I'm going to put in the compost afterwards. So we have a little tiny baking dish. So we do 1 egg, quarter cup kind of recipes. But she's learning, right? Because she's participating in that. So I think that ability. Friends, I want to help pray with us, and then I'm happy to hang around and have more conversations. But I want to invite us into a spirit of prayer as we close. And this comes from the book. It's the liturgy, God's Kitchen. You are welcome in God's kitchen just because. because we belong to God and we belong to one another. We're welcome in God's kitchen on good days and bad, when we're grieving, when we're celebrating, when we're craving community and we want to be alone. We're welcome in God's kitchen to create and to be fed, to connect and to celebrate, to heal and be nurtured, and to be transformed into God's beloved community kitchen. Amen. Thank you all so much. It's been such a joy to be with you, and I'll move out into the foyer and happy to be around and to talk more.